does the tax on fuel keep rising? It has a knock-on effect to the general public and businesses. For instance, it costs more to deliver food to supermarkets, so the supermarkets put the prices up. Would it not be more sensible to cut fuel tax in half? Oh, sorry. I'll start again.
That's all right. This is,
okay.
Yep. This is a question about why does the tax on fuel keep rising? In particular, would it not be more sensible to cut fuel tax in half to help the transport industry and create more jobs? And this goes first to Jim Murphy.
I think this is obviously a crucial question that we all have to address because, as you've mentioned, that the impact of the petrol price on the price of a loaf of bread or the price of a pint of milk, which is why over the past 10 years we have, of course, increased fuel duty on 3 occasions, but we've either frozen it or reduced it 11 times. And it's right just to get the balance here between support for motorists and keeping petrol affordable and ensuring that they get public finances in balance. So we can continue to look at this, and it's why we postponed the pre-announced increase in the budget. But it's an important question, and we continue to keep a very close eye on it.
David Mundell.
Well, I understand the question because I represent one of the largest rural constituencies in Britain. And a car in these areas, it isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. People need it to get to work, to go about their daily lives. So tackling the sort of fuel price rises and falls, the uncertainty of fuel prices that we've seen under this Labour government is something the Conservatives would give a priority to. We want to look at a fuel price stabiliser, which would mean that as the price of petrol went up, the duty came down to keep the price stable and have some planning. What also disappoints me, Alex, is the SNP policy of pushing through higher rates for rural petrol stations.
You'll get your chance on that in a moment. Alistair Carmichael.
Gentleman asks why duty keeps going up. It keeps going up because the government keeps putting it up. Believe me, you don't need to tell me about high petrol prices. I live in Orkney. You'll not get a litre of unleaded petrol in Orkney for much less than £1.30 a litre. That's the reality for us and for many remote communities and rural communities in Scotland today. The government could, if they wanted to, take some of that duty down for areas like ours. It would make a difference. And every time I suggest this in the House of Commons, you get the most arrant nonsense from government ministers who will tell you that people will take a 12-hour ferry from Aberdeen to Shetland to get petrol that is still going to be about 12 pence a litre dearer than they would get if they'd stayed at home. It's nonsense.
Thank you. Alex Salmond.
Well, 130 and even 140 in some of the island communities of Scotland. The average is 120 a litre, as Fraser well knows, across the country. Roughly 70% of that comes in duty and VAT. Therefore, since there seems to be an agreement that there's a problem here, when we proposed in the House of Commons to have that stabiliser, to use the increased revenues when the price of oil goes up to modulate the fuel duty and give some stability to the price at the pumps, then the Conservative Party didn't vote, and the Labour Party, you voted against it, Jim. In that case, Jim, it would have been better if you'd been in your bed, as opposed to turning up to vote against it.
Free debate now.
Yeah. Well, can I ask on this question of stabilisers or regulators? Because I'm not without sympathy for anything that I think is going to make a difference for probably the biggest single problem that faces the people that I've been representing for the last 9 years, and that is the high cost of petrol and diesel. But is not the danger with that sort of approach that, yes, it makes a difference when the oil price is high, but the oil price comes down? And don't you then risk locking in high oil prices? Because I remember when I was elected in 2001, I was told oil was then $11 a barrel. And one of the chief economists from one of the oil companies told me, we will never again see oil at $33 a barrel. He said it might get as high as 17. What, 2 years ago, what was it? 180.
But there's never been an issue with Westminster Chancellors about taking advantage of low oil prices to put a fuel price escalator on. I mean, that's what the Conservative Party did, and the Labour Party continued. What this proposal,
don't you risk locking in high prices,
Alex? That's happened already in terms of successive Tory and Labour Chancellors. They've put in fuel price escalators. What this does is the reverse. It takes advantage of the increased revenues to try and give a bit of relief to hard-pressed people like Fraser at the pump. It's a great idea, we should have support for it. And even though it's a belated conversion, David, I'd welcome your conversion to it.
Well, we think it is a good idea because what people find most difficult is the escalating fuel prices. I met a constituent the other day who told me that in the course of a week, petrol had gone up 1 pence each day, so that they couldn't plan as to what the cost of filling the tank is. I think getting some certainty would be a really positive thing for people. I'm interested in Alistair's idea, and I don't rubbish it, but I think that you have to be able to present how you could get it through the EU. Orkney is one example, but I have the M74 motorway going through my constituency, and it would be quite easy for people to travel from other areas to get reduced price petrol.
On average, we still have lower petrol prices than France and in Germany.
Sometimes.
But we have, on average at the moment. But what we have to do is ensure that we have a greater agreement across the world on the most volatile commodity in the world, oil prices. Now, we can have our debates here, and it's right we have these debates. My worry about the proposal you're making is that it will lock in and ensure that when prices go down, it maintains an artificially high price. But I think what the answer here is get all the oil-producing nations of the world working together in a way that perhaps we should work together, get them also to be working together. And that's exactly what Gordon Brown has been trying to do when he was Chancellor and Prime Minister.
We are an oil-producing nation, Jim, and that's why people can't understand.
That's why Gordon Brown has a seat at that table when we have those conversations.
That's why Fraser cannot understand. If we're one of the major oil and gas producers in the world, then why do we have these sky-high prices at the pumps? It is a rip-off. That is the point that Fraser's making.
None of you have mentioned the environment yet. My understanding was that one of the justifications of the high level of taxation was precisely to discourage people from causing global warming.
It's not that long ago that Alex was preaching the gospel according to Norway. The highest fuel prices of any country in Europe are actually Norway. So I think, as far as that's concerned, it's a case of be careful what you wish for in case it just comes true. But I want to ask David, well, first of all, he said we couldn't get the sort of scheme that I'm talking about, which is lower rates of duty for those areas for which is the biggest problem through the EU. There's absolutely no reason why we couldn't. France did a few years ago, and the thing that really sticks in my craw is that when France asked the EU for the permission to do that, the Labour government that says it can't be done here supported them in the Council of Ministers. But to David, who says that it is a good thing to lock in fuel at an artificially high price, I think the question that my constituents would want to know is what is that price going to be?
Well, we think that stability. We think stability in fuel prices is something that is worth achieving, and we want to look at that very seriously if we were in government. But it's all right. It is all right, Alistair, to come on a programme like this and to say that you would get the EU derogations to have regional fuel prices when you cannot guarantee that. I think it is an idea that is worth looking at it. But as with so many of your sort of wish list of promises, they cannot be delivered.
Well, at least we should make the attempt, David. Yeah. I mean, you know, if
I'll tell you this much, you'll not get if you don't ask.
Exactly. And if Scotland was represented itself, maybe it would be a priority to make that attempt, given the extent of fuel prices that Fraser was talking about. In fact, one wee disagreement with Alistair. If Fraser and the rest of us had Norwegian standards of living, which are approaching 50% more prosperous per head the United Kingdom, then it wouldn't be such a problem paying sky-high prices at the pumps.
Yeah, and the sun would always shine, and the traffic lights would always be at green.
Alex says it again, if only we had our own way, if only we were separate from the rest of the United Kingdom. Alec, you cannot base an entire economy on the cost and fluctuations in the most volatile commodity on earth. The fact is that we are better off and stronger together than we would be apart. And if anything has been learned over the past 2 years by the Scottish public in the midst of this recession, is it needs a government to stand by it, and we need to stay part of the United Kingdom, because we are much stronger together, and we would be much weaker apart.
Yeah, well, I've got bad news for you, Jim. The Chancellor of the Exchequer is basing his budget on £40 billion that he's expecting over the next 5 years from Scotland's sector of North Sea. Oh, we had access to these funds.
Our time is up on this question. The Scotland debate continues just a moment live from the Hub here in Edinburgh.